My talk this morning is Love Begins With Me. And when I first heard this idea, this principle, when I started coming to Science of Mind, it was really a revolutionary idea for me. I didn't realize that I had control over the amount of love that I had in my life, that I'm the one that decides how much love comes into my life. And it was quite an awakening to me, and it took me quite a while to get grounded in it. I read a marvelous quote by the French novelist George Sand. If you don't know who she was, well, first of all, she wasn't a he, she was a she, and she was quite revolutionary. She lived in the 1800s, and she dressed in men's clothes, and she had a whole host of lovers of all varieties. Chopin was her biggest name to fame, but she was quite the character and woman. She wrote, "The only happiness in life is to love and to be loved." The only happiness in life is to love and be loved. And I love that she starts off to love first. Because I think that's really how we have to start off. We have to love, and then we can be loved. And with our practice, the first thing that we have to love is we have to love ourselves. This can be a challenge. And it's interesting why we don't just naturally love ourselves. But we have to develop that love of ourselves and have a compassion and caring for ourselves. And you know, our dear bodies, as we go through this journey of life, they throw little surprises our way that challenge us to love ourselves more and to be compassionate with ourselves more. The other day I was working in the house, and I was working on the computer, and when I work on the computer I keep my eyeglasses on. And then sometimes I'll go get a drink and I'll still have the eyeglasses on, and so I have fuzzy vision, because I'm wearing the glasses. So I went to get something to drink, and I went to reach to take the glasses off and realized I wasn't wearing the glasses. So it can be a challenge to be kind and loving to ourselves and gentle with ourselves. It's surprising to me the number of people who aren't kind and loving and compassionate to themselves and are not willing to be loving and easy on themselves. They're very hard on themselves. I think that if they're not since life is hard, they also have to be hard on themselves. That if they're easy with themselves, that somehow it's going to make life more difficult. That life is tough, that all healings have to be painful and hard and difficult to get through. I still have a wonderful friend in D.C., and she is of this variety, that all healings have to be painful. One time she came into the office and her leg just looked terrible. And I asked her, I said, "Lynn, what's going on with your leg?" And she said, I got into a spot of poison ivy over the weekend. I said, "Okay." And she says, "My cure for poison ivy is I pour witch hazel on it." I thought that stuff went out with leeches. I didn't know they still have it. I pour witch hazel on it, and then I get my credit card and scrape it off. I thought, why didn't you just soak it in kerosene and light it? Now, this past week I had a little bit of experience of things being scraped off of me. I went to the dermatologist. First visit in 47 years. The last time I was at the dermatologist, I was 13 years old, and they gave me a lecture about eating too much chocolate, and then they gave me some cream to put on my acne. So it was a rather painless visit. This time I went in, and I knew that they were going to be checking things out, but I really just thought I was going to go in for kind of a look-see, that we were going to kind of just look and see what needed to be done, and we'd get to it at a later date if I chose to come back. And I wasn't in there 15 minutes, and the physician assistant, and he had an assistant, and I wasn't in there really prepared at any time, and they began to clip things off of me like you would clip an overgrown rose bush. And I was handling it all right, but then when he asked for the razor, and they were shaving body parts off, putting them in these little plastic cups and setting them before me. And there was just something very disturbing about seeing former body parts floating in liquids before me. So I was like, now wait a minute here. We've got to kind of slow this down a little bit. But you know, the young guy that was doing it, and he was so young. I have shoes older than he was. Shoes. I probably have underwear that's older than he was. But he couldn't have been nicer. He was so wonderful. And you know, you're so vulnerable because you're sitting in there with just the little paper thing around you. And he, you know, the whole time he was very comforting and very, very patient and very, very kind. And he just really made it made it easy to get through. And I reflected back on the dermatologist that I was going through when I was 13. That was the summer my dad died, and he had found out that my dad died. And so on one of my visits, he tried to console me, and all he could manage, he shook my hand. You know, and I was like, what am I, Prince Henry? But that was the training then. That's how he was trained. And so I think it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing that we are stepping into our humanity. And I think it's also really a good sign that we're giving males permission to be compassionate and to break down those barriers a little more. It's a wonderful thing. So I'm really at a place where I want to look and acknowledge as much love as I can, because when we see love and we acknowledge love, it expands. Dr. Holmes wrote, we live in a loving universe, and that's one of the fundamental decisions we have to make. Is the universe a loving place to be? Because when you make that decision, this is a loving place that I'm in, then we see more and more of it. Dr. Holmes wrote, my love warms and lightens everything it touches, and it goes out to all places. Love flowing through me is a power to all who come into contact with it, and they feel it, and they respond to it. Life in the world responds to the love that I allow to flow out from my heart and soul. I was also reading one of the miracle stories of St. Francis this week. I resonate with St. Francis quite a bit. Reverend Elizabeth gave me her St. Francis statue, and I'm loving seeing it in my yard. And so one of the St. Francis, you don't know much if you weren't if you're raised Catholic, you generally get to know about St. Francis, but Protestants don't learn that much of him. But he had many miracle stories, and he's in some ways he's called the second Christ, because he came about 1,000 years after Christ, and a lot of his miracles and a lot of his ministry really kind of replicate the ministry of Christ. And one of the stories about him is that there's a village that's having trouble with a wolf, and this wolf is attacking the villagers, attacking their livestock, and they can't kill it, they can't do anything with the wolf, so they call St. Francis in. And Francis goes into the forest to meet the wolf. And the story is, the moment the wolf sees Francis, it lays down. It gives up its anger, it lays down. And Francis goes up to the wolf and he says, "Brother wolf, you're causing a lot of problems here. You know, you are engaged in a lot of evil, and we can do better than this." And he tells him, he says, you know, you're causing these people problems, and that's generating hate. He says, what if we try to live with one another? What if we try to get the villagers, he told him, he says, I know what you're doing is because you're hungry. And he says, what if we get the villagers to feed you? Will you rise to a better circumstance? And Francis then walks with the wolf back to the village. And he tells them, he says, the wolf will be your friend. If you will feed him, he won't attack you. He won't attack your livestock. And you will be able to have a loving condition. I like the story because it shows how Francis was able to extend love to something that wasn't really acting very lovingly. And this is our challenge. Can we send love to that which isn't acting very lovable, but also in a sensible and a smart way? When he approached the wolf, he did it with compassion. Brother wolf, Yes, I'm connected with you, but he didn't turn away. He wasn't willing, he was willing to say, yes, you're doing some things that we need to change here. There's a better way. He allowed his compassion to allow the goodness of life to transcend the evil, and a new understanding came from it. New understanding. Love can transform our lives and can transform the world. There's a Unitarian minister that wrote a couple of books a couple of years ago, Robert Fulghum. One of his famous books was Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. It's a great little book. And he wrote the story. He was a Unitarian minister, I think up in Washington State. And he said that he went into the grocery store one day and he saw one of the members of his congregation, a young guy with his 5-year-old son. And he said the 5-year-old son had knocked over one of those big displays of cans. You remember how they used to do them? And said he had scolded the little boy, and it had upset the little boy so bad that he was just dissolved into tears. He was crying so much that then he threw up all over the cans and the aisles and everything. And Robert said he could just look at the expression on the father's face of just total frustration, in this havoc, just total frustration. He said 30 years later, he said he was out driving around in his neighborhood. He saw the same two again. He said now the son's in his full manhood, full strong and vigor. They're out jogging. And he says the dad now is in his 60s, a little bit older, somewhat frail. And he says you could watch the young son being careful of his dad, making sure his dad was seeing what was coming up, making sure they had a straight path to walk on. And he was like, this is love transformed. This is love transformed. I thought, as I've gone through life, one of the things that I think is a real challenge for us can be, is that oftentimes the people that we've nurtured, at some point, they begin to nurture us. And you wouldn't think so, but oftentimes it can be a challenge to accept that nurturing. It's like, wait a minute, I'm the one that, pays the bills. I'm the one that gets the vacation house. That's my job. My beloved niece, when she would come visit me, when she lived in Germany, she would come and spend the whole summers with us. And at one point, every summer, she'd want to go visit her girlfriends that would live outside of Atlanta. And so she would want to take I would encourage her to take my car so that she could drive, go to Augusta and different places. And so often she'd have it for a week to 10 days. And so she borrowed my car one year, and I told her as she was leaving, I said, the tires are okay. I said, but one of the tires has a slow leak in it, so just keep an eye on it. It'll be okay. It's just something you're going to have to keep an eye on. And when she brought the car back, she had replaced all 4 tires. Yeah. And it was a Jaguar, and so they were really expensive. It was really expensive. And at first I was like, oh, no, you can't do this. I got to write you a check. I can't let you spend this money. And then I realized, no, I have to accept this, because by my accepting it, I am showing how much I value her, how much I honor that she's a grown woman. She's out in the world. She knows what her finances are. She knows that she's capable of doing it. So I have to honor that she's now at a different place. And by me accepting it, I also, accepted that I'm at a different place. So as we move through our lives, we make adjustments. We have to make changes. And we have to be willing to accept the love that comes our way. And to accept I'm deserving of it. I'm deserving of it. One of our basic tenets is we believe in the eternal goodness, the eternal loving kindness, and the eternal givingness of life to all. I love that, the eternal givingness of life to all. Life loves and life gives. And when we love and we give, we put ourselves in the divine flow, which is forever, ever expanding. So the challenge then becomes, how can we look at situations and see the love in it? And we can't see the love, to keep open to our spirit-filled intuition so that we can find a way to see love in it. This past week, as many of you know, Reverend Liz, they were having the estate sale at her house. And so on Saturday, I went by just to make sure that there were people there. And I didn't realize that seeing people walk out with some of Reverend Elizabeth's things would be painful. And I felt a sadness about it. And I got to the first car, and it was a young couple. They were in their early 20s, and they were loading up one of the side tables that I had recognized, and they were loading it up, and the young woman had sent the young man back into the house, and I could tell the way she was looking at the table that this was the first nice piece of furniture she was buying. And I remember that time in my life. You know, you have your own apartment, and you get mom's cast-offs, and at some point you finally go out, you have enough money, and you're buying some good furniture. And I could just tell the way that she was admiring that table. This was what this was for her. And suddenly I thought to myself, this is exactly who Reverend Liz would like to have her table. This is exactly who she would want to have this table. And so as I walked past her, I told her, I said, I know the lady who lives in the house. I said, she's living with her daughter now. And I said, that house was so full of love. And I said, this table is so full of love, of great vibrations. I said, it's going to bring so much love to you. You're so lucky to have this table. I think I kind of scared her a little bit, but she seemed happy about it. Yeah. Dr. Holmes, he said the Spirit gives itself to everyone. The power of God is to deliver to all. He said we can transmute hate into love, fear into faith, a sense of separation into conscious unity with our good. This is what we're here to do. We're here to experience our unity with God. So we can have more of it, we can move forward, and we can make a change. I read this from a new author. I don't know who this is, but I love this. His name is Bradley Whitford. And this is what he wrote. He said, infuse your life with action. Infuse your life with action. Don't wait for it to happen. Make it happen. Make your own future. Make your own hope. Make your own love. And whatever your beliefs are, honor your creator, not by passively waiting for grace to come down from above high, but by doing what you can to make grace happen. Yourself, right now, right down here on earth. This is what we're challenged to do, to make grace happen, to make love happen. Not when we reach heaven, not when we have enlightenment. Just as we are here now, we're called to make grace happen, to make love happen, to bring a new heaven and a new earth. And we can do it by being grace-filled, by being love-filled, by looking out and saying, what good, what love can I see, and what can I do to make more of it, to expand it, to bring more people in. Another story I read this week is a beautiful story. It's a little sad. It's about 2-year-old Brody Allen. And he's 2 years old. He just turned 2. And he's got a very, very aggressive form of cancer. And his parents were taking him to specialists and hospitals. And he was going through all sorts of really, harsh treatments. And finally the doctors came and they said, there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do. And so his parents said, well, if there's nothing that they can do, let's stop the treatments and let's make whatever remaining time he has the best time it can be. And they made the decision. He's only had one Christmas. So they made the decision, we're going to give him a second Christmas. Because they don't think he'll survive till Christmas. We're going to give him a Christmas now. So they decorated the house. They decorated their house with Christmas. The little lady who was living next door, she doesn't even speak English. But she saw this house being decorated with Christmas decorations in August, and she went to see, what's going on here. And they explained the story to her. And she was like, I'm decorating my house. I'll decorate my house. She decorated hers, and of course the neighbors are like, what is this about? They started hearing it. They decorated their houses. Then there was a professional guy, one of those guys that, opened Santa Land where you drive through with all the decorations. He told him, I'll show you some decorations. I'll decorate the whole street, and we'll have a whole Christmas festival, fantasy land on your street. The mayor found out about it and said, what's Christmas without a Christmas parade? We're going to get this kid a Christmas parade. So they've got bands. They've got, everything you need for a parade. The firefighters came out and said, you have to have a fire truck. You got to have Santa Claus on the fire truck. And little Cody or little Brody is going to ride on the fire truck with Santa. They're bringing a healing to his life. Now, is it a healing that we would all long for? We have to leave that up to Spirit. But in that moment when Brody is riding on that fire truck with Santa, he's going to have a healing. His parents is going to have a healing. And it's going to be a healing that's going to allow them to have the courage and the strength to overcome whatever is in front of them and to go on even more powerful. That lady who couldn't speak English that decorated her house, the first one, she's going to have a healing because she's going to know and understand what that one decision to be loving, one decision to be kind, how impactful it was. And that whole community is going to have a healing. Dear friends, our world is in need of a healing right now. And that healing can come about when we choose to be like Dolph says, to be the first one to say, I love you. To not to look so much at the problem, not to allow our anger to get into that turmoil of dispute, but to be able to look those people that we may not agree with and say, beloved neighbor, brother Wolf, you might have been causing problems, but I know something better about you. I know that we can rise up. I know we can lift ourselves up to a better understanding, a more loving, a more compassionate world, a world that works for everyone. And we will do it through our love. We will do it when we start loving ourselves, when we love each other, when we know that we can lift our eyes up to a better understanding, a new earth, a new heaven, here, now, and now's the moment to do it. Now's the lifetime to do it, and you're the channel by which it would happen. This is the power you have. Spirit loves you. Spirit supports you. I love you, and I support you. This is the truth in your life this morning. It's the truth in mine, and so it is. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bob, you got a new guitar player this morning, do you?